This is Show Up as a Leader, a show from People Forward Network, helping you maximize your positive impact on the world by becoming your best, fully authentic self. Hey, everyone. I think this is going to be one of those conversations that there may or may not be tons of new things, but I think it's a lot of reaffirming reminders and kind of getting us back to what matters. I thoroughly enjoyed the time that I spent with Jeff Eschliman. He is an executive coach with all kinds of experience from combat in Iraq to the corporate boardroom. And he is really focused on helping busy people create harmony in their life. And why I wanted to talk to him is I'm a busy person who is constantly trying to work on creating harmony in my life. And some days I'm better at it than others. And I know that I'm not alone because I talk to so many people and I coach so many people who struggle with this. Sometimes I think the busier we are and the more we have going on in our life, the harder it is to really feel like we have any control or can create that harmony. So he has kind of a 3-step process that he talks about. He talks about, first and foremost, we have to have this 1-page plan for life. So you're going to want to listen to that and some of the things that are on that 1-page plan. We have to really think about carpe diem. And really, carpe diem is how we have consistency to bring that plan to life and to reevaluate things. And then finally, he talks about a day of Zen, or a process where we check out so we can check in. So you're going to want to listen for those 3 things. And he anchors all of this on a philosophy that I can be happy with what I have while I pursue what I want. And so there's a lot of tips and nuggets that we talk about. And I think you're just going to get a ton out of it. All right, Jeff, we are going to dive right in because I think that this conversation and the work you do is so timely because all we hear about is stress and burnout, and people are reevaluating their life and what matters. And your sweet spot is helping busy people create harmony in their life. And I know we talk a lot about work-life harmony in the work we do, and some people are like, that's a myth. It doesn't exist. So before we get into how we do that, I would love for you to give a little bit of backstory of how did you become so passionate about helping busy people create harmony in their life? Where did this come from?
It was basically born out of my own experience. And so I like to use the analogy of the plate spinning. I'm about as good at that as anybody that I've ever met in my life. That meant I was a busy corporate executive and a husband and father and all these other roles in my life. And I was really good at playing the game of business, the game of life, but it was hedonic. What am I doing here? What am I chasing? I never really would say that I got to like burn out myself personally, but when I was even creeping up what I felt like that would be, I just started asking myself different questions like, life has to be different than this. I love to be successful. I love to say success is whatever you decide for you. And I've made my own decisions about what success looks like financially or health or things of that nature. But playing the game and just running hard all of the time, but never really enjoying the moment, that's where it came from for me. And after I started putting things in play in my own life and figuring out a better way, I'll give you just the last line of my core written purpose. It's a direct lift from Jim Rohn. It summarizes how I'm trying to live my life now and what I want to help my clients do. And it says, I'm happy with what I have while I pursue what I want. And I love that. I have a whole paragraph that's my written purpose in life. But when anybody asks me, I can say just that one single line. It summarizes how I'm trying to do this thing now.
It is a powerful statement. And what I love about that is so many times in various aspects of our life, we get stuck into this binary thinking. So in the work I do, we always talk about we can believe and feel enough exactly as we are and work to become a better version of ourselves. So you said, I can be happy with what I have and still pursue other things, pursue goals. It doesn't have to be an either or. And I think so often we do get sucked into that. So I appreciate that. And I think a lot of people are reevaluating stuff in today's day and age. And sometimes they feel guilty about reevaluating stuff. And I think we're always reevaluating, like, what's the matter? If someone dies, how often do you have to wait till someone dies and, it puts things into perspective, what matters? And that lasts about a week. And then we get right back into our patterns because we are creatures of comfort and habit. So I just think that there's a lot of merit in that. So then let's talk about, you became passionate about this. So how do we do this? How do we find the both and of, hey, I can be busy and be productive and also find harmony? Because I can just tell you, this is the focus of half of the coaching conversations I have on a weekly basis. People are struggling with this.
I love to use this I word, intentionality. The majority of the stuff that I've implemented in my life, Rosie, is a direct lift from business. And when you're intentional about your life, which includes intentionally deciding what you want, it sometimes amazes me. It's like, wow, you're running this successful business and you seem to have all that going, but I don't think you've really decided how you want your life to look, or what's the next 5 years and the next 10 years look like in your world. And then the other thing I would say is implementing systems. I was an operations guy in my career, so I was really big on systems and things of that nature. And I started putting these things in play in my life. The other thing I would say is I'm a tools guy, and that's what I like to give my clients, the tools that they can use. But being intentional with your life, and for me, that starts with what I call my North Star, which is a one-page plan for your life. So we ran our business off of a document called a one-page plan. So think about the old school, like big 3-ring binders of strategy and, how we're going to do it this year and that kind of thing. And then you go off site and you spend 3 days putting all that together, and then the thing sits on a shelf. And so this one-page plan is this very elegant way where you decide who you are, you decide what you're all about, you put your purpose and your vision and your mission and your goals and all these things on your one-page plan. I did that for myself. That was one of the first tools that I used. And then I started helping my clients implement that. And so I can riff on the other elements, but that one-page plan, that's a great place to start. That's where that line of my core written purpose lives, on my one-page plan for my life.
So let's talk more about that one-page plan, because what I love about what you said is most organizations, I would say the old school, or we call it the old paradigm way of approaching strategic planning, is pay an overpriced consultants and go off-site, the executive team, come back with this big old plan, and then it's rigid, and we're going to try to push it down through the organization, and it rarely goes as planned. And I think we have to be fluid about it, but also, who the heck is going to remember a multi-page document? We need simple, right? Our overloaded brains, we're on cognitive overload. We can only absorb so much. So talk to me about what are some of the things in the one-page plan, and how could people create one for themselves and use it as either a starting point or that North Star you said, to help be more intentional and start to create more harmony in our lives.
I'll just walk you through an example of how I do it with a new client. So I call my coaching style bespoke. So I sit down, and there's no two people that have the same plan, because no two people's lives are the same. So we sit down and we evaluate what's going on in their life. And then one of the first things that I'll often do is implement this one-page plan. What it has on it is core values, core competencies, and then your purpose. And we spend 1 or 2 meetings just refining all that in your life. And I like to say this, Rosie, when you articulate these things in writing, it's not hard to believe that you'd have core values and that kind of thing for your business and have that in writing. But how many people do that for themselves personally? Now, everybody probably to some extent has their core values that are running their life. That's what's underlying in your own programming. But when you articulate it yourself, I say this about my one-page plan. It tells me as much about what I'm not going to do in the future as it tells me what I'm going to do. It makes it really easy to say no when things come into my life and they don't fit with the programming going forward. We probably both know this as coaches, right? When we're dealing with people, oftentimes they've just overcommitted. They want to try and be the best mother and CEO and all these things in life, but it's really about deciding and making decisions on what is the most important part. That's what the one-page plan does, including yearly goals. And then I have monthly goals on there. So one of the other things we're going to talk about, hopefully, is consistency, because just as soon as you built your best laid plan, you have this wonderful little strategic plan for your life. Guess what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks? Life's going to start dealing you challenges, because that's the way life works. So I've got a plan for that too.
I so appreciate that approach, because like you said, if you have a plan, but you haven't thought about the systems or the deliberate practices that allow that plan to come to life, it does just become, oh, that was a nice exercise. And it gives you enough clarity to tell you as much of what you say no to. And I think that's so important, because we also do work with individuals and leaders and teams to help them clarify their core values. And then we actually have them go through an exercise where they identify what behaviors tell them they're in alignment with those values, what behaviors tell them they're out of alignment. So they have behavioral guideposts and then create a summary grid. It's a way that I can ground myself and go, am I overcommitting? Because that's one of my behaviors that actually pulls me out of alignment. And I've identified that. Or am I pushing my ideas and being right? Or I'm excusing poor behavior. So I have the behaviors that tell me, Rosie, you're getting pulled away from yourself. And it helps me get back in. I've worked with so many leaders where they're like, oh, I've already done work on my core values. And they have a list of 7. And I'm like, there is no way that can be a filter. Like, how are you going to remember 7? And then I ask them, how do you operationalize that? Well, they don't. So they've gone through some kind of exercise to have aspirational values. This is who I want to be, which that's fine. But no, who are you and what do you anchor yourself on when life does what it does? What do you use to pull yourself back? And so many people haven't taken that extra step. And for me, that's a piece that at least I found is a huge game changer. And it's what allows me to live my purpose. It's like, you can't live your purpose if you don't have those behavioral guideposts for your values. What's your thought about that? What's been your experience?
First of all, what you just mentioned was the know thyself piece, which is fun and an interesting journey of reflection and a whole separate podcast about personal development. But you're on point. The folks that I'm working with, they start on the mission. I call it groping your way forward. It's like you're in the dark and you're trying to stumble around and find what the right way forward is. Life is like that somewhat anyway, but when you're more deliberate about it, guess what? You're going to get better results. That's what I've done in business and that's what I've done in my own life. And that's just the best way that I've ever seen it work.
So let's say I've done this 1-page plan and I'm really clear about who I am and I'm clear about where I want to go. But how do I balance that with the constraints where maybe I feel like I don't have control over my schedule, where people are putting stuff on my calendar, where I have a lot of stuff being thrown at me, where maybe my organization is not running as effectively as it could. And so therefore I'm working way more hours than I would like. And I feel like I don't have a say in that because sometimes it's true. Sometimes it's our own self-limiting narrative. Sometimes there are very real cultural and environmental and systemic constraints happening within the organization. So how do we go from this 1-page plan to actually then dealing with the constraints that we may or may not have any control or influence over to try to create more harmony in our life?
The first thing I'd want to do if I was working with a client right here is challenge that thought that I don't have control. Because with most people, if you really thoughtfully took apart your calendar and your schedule, it's probably at least 80-20, where I'll bet you really do have control over 80% of your calendar and maybe 20% are these other things. And so I would say, let's start with the 80% that you can control. And I want to use the word that you used before, which was operationalize. And so I'll use part number 3 of my process right now, which is called Carpe Diem, which is obviously Latin for seize the day. Because what you do every day matters. And I think far too many people don't really appreciate that. And so Carpe Diem for me resonated with me. That's how you operationalize what's on the 1-page plan and you put it into work every day. So for me, I take all of these roles that I have, like CEO and coach and father and all these other roles. I'm still spinning plates, but they are working in harmony with the 1-page plan. And now let's specifically answer your question about how do you address those things. The Carpe Diem has what's called AM and PM bookends. So first of all, how do you have a great AM? Start with having a great PM. So what I'm talking about here is sleep. How many people overlook the quality of their sleep and how that's affecting their life? And so how do you affect your sleep in a positive way? Obviously, what time we go to bed matters, but how late you eat your last meal, if alcohol is a thing in your life. I've tested all these things in my own life to see how they affect. If you can't take care of yourself personally, your own mental well-being and your physical well-being, you don't end up winning the game. You're going to have something that happens in your life physically. And I've come close with some of these things in my 30s, as a matter of fact, where they were signs for me that said, hey, buddy, you're not taking care of yourself. You're going to need to take this pill the rest of your life because you can't make good decisions. That was a wake-up call for me. And so if you can have these AM and PM bookends where you're being intentional with your morning, if you've got meditation or your movement or your prayer, whatever you have going on in your routine, most of the folks on the audience or most of our clients would say, you know what? When I do something that's good for me more consistently, whether it's go to the gym or eat healthy or any of these things, my life seems to go better. Is that a big shocker or surprise? No, it's not a big shocker or surprise. The problem is people have trouble not only implementing it, but then the biggest problem is the consistency.
And it is so funny because we all intuitively know, like you said, this isn't something earth shattering or new. We all intuitively put our own oxygen masks on before helping others. And there can be all this stuff. Like I know years ago, I couldn't just be like, I need to go take a half-hour workout break. And if everyone is just sitting around, why can't I? And being able to change it to speaking up of like, in order for me to show up as a good mom, as a good spouse, as a good friend, I need to go take care of me for a bit. I need to go, whatever, go have a pedicure, go work out. And so now we have open dialogues about what are we needing. And I also do that with my team. I think so many people don't want to have those conversations with their team, but it's like, what do you need to be your best? We set self-care goals as well as work-based goals, and we revisit them. We do quarterly offsites and we revisit them to say, how are we doing and where have we fallen short and how can we get back to supporting one another? Can we also include check-ins? But we keep coming back to these lessons of, I'm not the best version of me for anybody in my life when I'm depleted. And so that reminder helps change that narrative. And you're right. So then it gets into consistency. So those are some like the systemic things, how we've taken that blend of individual well-being with organizational well-being and recognizing they're not separate. And you don't even have to ask what your team members' self-care routine is. Just say, what are you doing to take care of you? And is there anything I can do to support you? If we're not at least including that in a conversation, why not?
That's beautiful. I love that.
So then talk to me more about what are some things that people could do to help them to go from that one-page plan to consistency.
Consistency would be having something like a carpe diem type process in your life. I was talking about this on my podcast just last week. The theme was about consistency. And so one of the things that I mentioned was just tracking in general. Now, I'm kind of a geeky operations guy myself, and that's in my natural nature to track things. So one thing that I've been into, Rosie, over the last handful of months myself is intermittent fasting because I've never done that before and I'm experimenting with it right now. And so one of the things that I'm doing is I track every day, like what is my eating window? How many hours am I fasted? That kind of thing. Because when we start tracking and we start writing things down, especially of our own performance, what gets measured gets done. Tracking is one of the best ways that I'd say. And there's so many ways to do this. If you're more of like a spreadsheet geek and that resonates with you, or as you jokingly said in the beginning, there's an app for everything now. If you want MyFitnessPal to track your calories or what you're eating, it does all the work for you. Like you just have to put the information in. I would say the number one thing for me, outside of having a good accountability partner or an accountability system, is to add tracking to improve your consistency. But between accountability and tracking, those are probably my number 1 and 2 for being able to improve your own consistency.
Yeah, I'll put stuff on my calendar, whether it's I put my workout appointments on my calendar or whatnot, especially until something becomes second nature. There is something about you paying, you have to be more conscious of it because it's not like at that unconscious habit level yet. So I think there's something to that. So a lot of the work that we do, there's the part of having more human workplaces and developing effective leaders. And we always talk about that. You can't develop people or take a changed person and put them back into an unchanged environment and expect things to be different. And one of the things that I really appreciate is you have this view on operations excellence that success and harmony are not, again, either or, they can coexist. And I want to dig into that a little bit because what I see so often with our clients is when they think about their strategic plan, when they think about their business goals, they are tracking numbers and growth and revenue and calls. And there's nothing in their metrics that talks about the harmony part. It's just go, go, go. So it invites people to not set boundaries. It invites people to not take care of themselves because they are trying to help the organization achieve its goals. And also, as economies shrinking in various industries and some are doing layoffs, there's even more of this scarcity mindset. So talk to me about some ways that we can find that coexisting space of success and harmony, because I think a lot of people struggle with that as well.
From a business standpoint, and let's go at this maybe from the CEO perspective real quick, I think you have to make the people part of the equation a part of not only the conversation, but a part of the metrics. So if you don't have things in your organization where you evaluate your team's feedback, let's say an engagement survey, first of all, the biggest underlying issue for me in business is lack of communication. So I think it's the CEO's job. I think it's the leadership team's job to effectively communicate to their teams what's going on with the business. That seems obvious. Every business that I go coach in, that seems to be one of the underlying issues. They don't have an effective communication system to talk about how the business is doing. Something's happening in the economy right now. We're going to have to make changes. We had to make changes with people. We have to make changes with process because that's how business works. You have to adapt to the environment and figure it out going forward. But the underlying part of all this is the team aspect. And so having either metrics around what you're doing with your team, again, an engagement survey is one way to do it. I would call it the pulse on the team because their health, physical health, and all of these things are so vitally important. Henry Ford talked about people bringing their hands to work. That's an old analogy from the 30s where people were manufacturing versus the information age that we're in, or technology age. But we as leaders see the people as the cogs that are in the wheel getting the work done. And certainly we all are. But at the end of the day, we are people first. We have our issues from home that we're dealing with. And regardless, that kind of thing comes to work in some kind of way. And so if you don't have, as you alluded to, like creating this wonderful kind of safe space where your team is not only actively talking about it, but you have goals and metrics that are aligned around their personal well-being. And I think all those, that's all pure gold because I think too often in business, there's appropriate amount of focus on the business itself. But when you're not evaluating the individual team members and how they're doing and how we're doing as a team, and I am talking about the people side of the equation, that is so powerful. And I've seen it be so successful when you intentionally focus on the people side.
Absolutely. And we have a variety of different assessment tools that we use for various reasons. And one of the ones that we actually use looks at this balance or integration, if you will, between work life and personal life and looks at stress indicators. And we've used that sometimes with our clients when they're looking at succession planning or they're looking at stretch projects or key initiatives to see who even has capacity. If you have people who are cognitively on overload and their stress indicators are not in a healthy zone, they actually aren't going to have the capacity to take something on, even if they think they do. In the absence of doing something more formal like that and those quarterly check-ins, we always encourage teams, are you just doing short huddles, especially if you happen to be hybrid or remote to check in? But even if you're in person, quick huddles to check in, just sync up on the day, what's happening, doesn't have to be long. On our team, we've transitioned to a 2-word check-in of how are you feeling today? And if I hear people say things like I'm worried or I'm stressed or I'm overwhelmed, I know that we have to chat a little bit further to see what's happening because my role as a leader is to try to support them in removing barriers. It's not about fixing things, but it's like, what do I need to know? And hey, you know what? You're distracted because you have this going on in your personal life. What can we reprioritize? What can we take off your plate? Or do we need to rethink something? Because I have no problem advocating to say, guess what? This isn't going to happen right now. The world isn't going to end, but it will end if these people are not whole. The other thing we'll do is we'll use from the conscious leadership group, the choice line and just do thumbs up. Are you above the line, right in the line, like flat hand or below the line? And that's also a quick check-in of if you have a lot of below the line, people are struggling. And I think we just jump right to task and we don't check in. So I think that there's ways in a business, if I need my people who have the most energy and capacity besides skills to take something on, the same people keep being the go-to people and more stuff ends up on their plate rather than building capacity of others or saying, not that this person's not talented, they don't have the capacity right now. Who else? And if you don't have other go-to people, to me, that's a flaw of development because why can you only rely on a couple of people? You really need to build your capacity so you can rely on more people.
That's definitely a sign.
For sure. What are some other things when you think about what you see people struggling with and you think about this idea that I can be busy and have harmony in my life at the same time? What are some other key things people should be considering or putting into practice that would be helpful?
And that's where I really wanted to hit on this Day of Zen philosophy. And I call it the Day of Zen because I take an entire day once a month myself. Now, when I implement this with my clients, I share the tools, we talk about their life, we implement what works. But for me, I have so many written goals and I have so much going on in my life that I need an entire day to do this. And I've been doing this now for 15 years. And so I was really fortunate to work in an organization where I got a lot of vacation. So I took it doing this because I tried doing it on Saturdays and other times and it just didn't work for me mentally. I call the tagline for the Day of Zen checking out so you can check in. So what you're checking out on is everything from your day-to-day life. You don't stay at home. You don't go to your office. You pick a location that is remote. And I like the outside. I like to go to where things are bigger than me and it inspires me. So I've got everybody in my life trained now, my kids or my spouse or business people. Like if it's my Day of Zen, you're not going to get me. That's just a non-negotiable. And so what I do, the first half of the day for me, and imagine if you were doing 2 or 4 hours in your own world, the first half of the time is nothing but a wholesale reflection of the previous month. And so I'm looking through, for example, the last one I just did was a wholesale reflection of July. I have all of these vital metrics that I track, which are my body fat percentage and how much money's in my 401k and all these different things that are numbers that I track. And I look at that every month to just see where I'm at. And then the second half of the day is a plan. So building a plan for that next month. What am I going to do to crush it? And 9 times out of 10, when I do my reflection, I've got 25 things on a list that really went well that previous month. And I can give myself a lot of satisfaction for what is being achieved in any given month. And then on average, there's going to be 3 or 4 things where I didn't move the needle. And then I just ask myself the follow-up questions. Okay, if I didn't, why not? Maybe it wasn't the right time. Maybe it was a bandwidth thing for me personally. Maybe it was I didn't have the goal well crafted and it didn't resonate with me. So I just didn't do anything with it. And I've been doing this a long time. So I just think the Zen process is twofold, Rosie. One, it gives you what I call white space. Regardless, if you just had 2 hours blocked out on a Saturday where you could commit to, or for me, I've got a whole day. I know that I've got a safe space once a month where I'm going to evaluate what has happened. I think we say that we're going to do these things in our head. We say, oh, there's a weekend coming up, so I'll be able to pedal downhill and get caught up. But then next thing you know, your T-ball games and grocery shopping and meal prepping and everything else that goes on in life. And next thing you know, it's Monday. The part for me is the white space where you can actually do the work on yourself. And then the other is it gives you the space to think because it's something that you're reacting to in your life. Obviously, there's plenty of people, like we were talking Pareto before 80-20. So there's 20% other people in our life, our boss, our customers, our family. It could be as simple as a child in your family that's suddenly struggling with something that they're working on in school that they're going to need more attention, or it's a aging parent who's going to need a different level of care. Where do you have the bandwidth to even process what that might mean in your life the rest of this year for the next 5 years? That's why I'm really keen on having this really intentional time where I check out from the rest of the world and I make no apology. Is this selfish process? Yes. This is one of the most important things of the entire process is making sure that you carve out some time for you to do this work in the white space.
I love the intentionality that you put behind that. And it got me thinking with a lot of our clients, and we practice this as well, we do quarterly offsites for that reason to reflect on this past quarter and where are we and where do we need to course correct and what have we learned and what adjustments do we need to make. And one of the things that my team and I realized at our last quarterly offsite at the end of June was we're not revisiting our summary because we reshift to our priorities shift and what's our priority for the next quarter. And based on what's transpired and just the evolving world, we need to revisit these at least monthly because we're not pulling them out. And then it's like, how can we course correct? And so I love that. I think about when my son was young, I was struggling. How do I figure all this stuff out? And so I would take one PTO day a month back then, before I had my own company. And I would take PTO middle of the month while he was at daycare, while my husband was at work to like do household chores, get caught up on life. And as I'm listening to you, what I'm thinking, so I'm putting this out there to the universe, listeners hold me accountable, is I'm not checking in monthly or having that time like I used to. And I think that there's something to that frequency, whether it's a couple hours, how can you create that space? Because I know when I have a deliberate practice of reflecting or looking back, I do far better than when it's sporadic, than when it's up and down, up and down. All right. So speaking of self-reflection and knowing thyself, one of the things that I am passionate about in the work that I do is normalizing the messiness of being human. And I have learned over the years that no matter how much work we do on ourselves, we all have some common elements that get in our way and that we tell ourselves self-limiting stories. And so what I would love for you to share, Jeff, is what is a self-limiting story that you still tell yourself sometimes? And when it shows up, how do you move beyond it so that you still can live into that one-page plan? You still can show up as a leader in your life and have the impact you want to have.
I wasn't a very good student in school, A's in shop class and PE and solid C's and all of the things that probably really mattered. And so that's the story that I had for myself. I went right out of high school and into the military, and then right from the military and into my corporate career. So no higher education. That was part of the story that I had for myself. So why go do that? Just go to work and power through it. And unfortunately, that caught up with me about age 38 because I'd made a lot of poor decisions in my life and things were kind of mounting, sitting on the doctor's table and he's writing you a prescription for a drug that you were going to have to take the rest of your life, that kind of thing. What actually happened for me in that moment is I had a shift where I said, it doesn't matter if I'm a good student or not. I can't stop learning. The way that I looked at it after I got out of high school and the military is like, I learned the book stuff there and now I'll just go to work and power forward. So what happened to me at age 38, that's the first time that I ever became a lifetime learner, which is what I am now. So that's why I read all the books and do all the audios and all the self-reflection. And that is one of my core values on my one-page plan. I am a lifetime learner. I am still going to be learning into my late 90s because I'm going to live to be at least 103. It's a commitment.
You're Jiminy Cricket. You're going to live to be 103.
My number's totally random.
There you go. You and Jiminy Cricket. You're simpatico. I love it. And I appreciate that as well, and you sharing, because there are a lot of people that either they didn't get good grades in school and they carry a narrative about not looking stupid, or I'm not a good student, and they hold themselves back. And let's be honest, school measures one type of intelligence. So that can definitely be a common one. So thank you for sharing that. Are you ready to go to quick questions?
Let's do it.
All right. Fill in the blank. Living authentically is?
Knowing thyself.
Somehow I knew you were going to say that. I love that. When the world is presenting an opening, but you don't feel like showing up as a leader, what do?
Do it anyway.
Bam. What is something people would be surprised to know about you?
When I was in the military, I was in Operation Desert Storm, so drove an armored personnel carrier into Iraq.
All right. Thank you for your service, by the way. What is your favorite go-to movie?
This is an old Vision Quest. It's a movie about wrestling.
Was it Matthew Modine?
Yes. So obscure. I feel dirty even saying it out loud, but anyway, that's the one.
Madonna had a song in that. Wasn't that where her Crazy For You song came in?
You're right.
All right. Your go-to song.
I don't think I have a go-to song. Next question, please. Pass.
Moving on. What is something you can't live without?
Knowledge.
Nice. What is something in your ordinary daily life that makes your heart happy?
Writing in my gratitude journal.
I love that. And speaking of gratitude journal, the last of quick questions. What are you grateful for right now?
I'm grateful here in my region that it's not going to be over 110 for 10 days in a row.
All right. Last closing question. Jeff, if you could challenge leaders everywhere to practice this one behavior that would create more human workplaces and equip everyone to show up as a leader, what would that be?
I'm a big fan of praise. And so the old analogy of coach in private and then praise in public. But whether you're praising in public or praising people individually, I'm a big fan of that. Just old school Dale Carnegie 101. But I don't think leaders are as intentional as they should be about their praise. And so if you just do basically three things, if you call somebody out specifically for what they did and why you're praising them, if you say how you feel about it, and then number three, and this is maybe the most fun, is how did it affect the greater good? If you mention those three things, and this takes maybe 14 more seconds than it does to just say, hey, good job, Rosie. Good job, Rosie feels better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. But if you do intentional praise and you do those three things, you'll take your intentionality game to the next level.
I love that. We call it the FBI feedback formula, feeling, behavior, impact. Going back to deliberate practices, one of the things I will actually challenge leaders after we teach the FBI feedback model is, I don't care if you do it on Monday or Friday or Wednesday, but put a time on your calendar where you are going to reflect and find authentic, genuine reasons to recognize people and then use this formula to do that. And you will start to look for the good stuff, and people will start to feel more appreciated. And then when you have to have some of those growth feedback conversations, it's a little easier because that's not the only time they're hearing from you.
Exactly. And if you want to go 10x, do handwritten notes. If you want to be old school.
Yes, hands down.
You'll be in the top 1% of leaders if you write handwritten notes.
Love it. Well, Jeff, thank you for your authenticity. Thank you for your tangible nuggets of wisdom and tools that people can use. We'll put links to the resources in the show page, and it's just been a true pleasure.
Absolutely. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to peopleforwardnetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.